Hey, 42 here. Looking your best sometimes takes a bit of effort. Whether it's a few hours shopping for jeans that don't make your legs look like two toothpicks sticking out of a watermelon, or getting every single hair in the right place. I know, your hair can be cruel sometimes. But putting blood, sweat and tears into our appearance, sometimes very literally, is not a new thing. Mankind has been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. Apes were barely out of the trees before they started wondering if they'd look better with banana skins over their nipples and a few crocodile teeth through their earlobes. So today we look at some of the most extreme modifications that people have made to their own bodies. In Skilo's famous love poem from 1995, he wrote, "I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. I wish I had a girl who looked good. I would call her." And while the last two are very possible through practice and Tinder, your height is something you're stuck with as it's down to your skeleton. Stuff like boobs, noses, eyelids are changeable. Your skeleton is set though, isn't it? Well, not as much as you'd think. And if you get to work on it early enough, you can put in some serious interior design changes. Binding involves wrapping bandages or cords very tightly around body parts for many months and slowly changing the shape and alignment of your bones. It's normally done on infants as they're much more malleable. The most extreme form is cranial deformation or head binding, which has occurred all over the world and is still done occasionally in places like Polynesia and Congo. At birth, the skull is made up of 44 separate bone elements, which are connected with tissues called fontanelles, that allow the rapid brain expansion that occurs at a young age. Over time, many of these 44 parts fuse together, but surprisingly, the skull never actually stops growing. Your cheekbones continuously draw back and your forehead keeps pushing forward. That's right, you're getting a flat face. But before the fusing occurs, you can bind up the skull and elongate it over a period of months. In many cultures, such as the people of Tommen Island, the practice is often done since a long head is associated with wisdom. For the Mayans, it was thought to be aesthetically pleasing. It's also thought that some cultures were trying to emulate other tribes who naturally had this longer head, since a mummified female body found in Peru contained a fetus with an elongated skull, meaning it must have been genetic rather than caused artificially. In China, the practice of foot binding lasted almost 1,000 years, where young girls' feet were wrapped to make them as small as possible. It was thought to make them more attractive, and it saved them a fortune since they could buy their Converse from the kids section. Similar to binding is the practice of using rings. The most famous, of course, are neck rings, but it is a common misconception that you are actually stretching the neck, somehow lengthening the vertebrae. In fact, the weight of the rings acts to push down the collarbone and the upper ribs to give the illusion of a longer giraffe-like neck, but it is actually just shortening your body. The practice still happens today in some areas of Thailand, Myanmar and parts of Africa. The rings can end up weighing as much as 10 kilos each, and they either start at around 2 years old since it's less painful to do it slowly over time, or at the age of 12 when they are considered ready to marry. I think they've just been listening to too much Beyonce. Guys, you don't have to put a ring on that. It's not exactly sure how the practice started. Obviously it's seen as elegant and beautiful, but some people also theorise that it was protection against tiger attacks. It's the same reason that all British people wear ankle bracelets, in case we're attacked by badgers. Or is that just me? As for the human bite, well, it's pretty pathetic compared to many of our animal brethren, although there are a surprising amount of human bite attacks, over 1,000 per year in New York alone. And if you want to add a bit more bite to your bite, then it's time for some extreme dentistry. Teeth sharpening occurs in many pockets all over the world, from the Congolese to parts of Vietnam and South America. It's often an aesthetic practice done with a chisel, but in Bali, teeth are thought to represent negative emotions, such as anger and jealousy, and so they are filed down to lessen these emotions. For the Mayans, it was a class-based system, so a fancy set of sharp fangs was the modern-day equivalent of some red trousers and a glass of Pimm's. Holes. We all have them, and they are a source of never-ending hilarity and embarrassment. Most mammals have the same selection of orifices as we do, except from a few types of mole, which have a thing called a cloaca, which is one orifice that has the combined use of excretion, urine, and reproduction. Now that's just disgusting. The cloaca is standard for all amphibians, birds, and reptiles. Some mollusks have a thing called a siphon, which lets water or occasionally air flow through it, used for a combination of movement, feeding, breathing, and reproduction. I just hope they clean it out between each one. But humans have a habit of creating artificial holes, which they fill in with piercings or gradually expand using a series of rings. The ancient Egyptian king Tutankhamun is one of the earliest recorded examples of ear stretching, since you can see it depicted on his sarcophagus. The 5,000-year-old Ötzi the Iceman, who was discovered in the Himalayas, also had flesh tunnels. His My Chemical Romance t-shirt had unfortunately not survived though. In some Hindu culture, a woman's nose was pierced as a sign that she was ready to be married. It was typically the left nostril too, as that was thought to relieve some of the pain of childbirth. In ancient times, it would also help her to attach more jewellery to her face, which was important, since anything worn for the wedding was hers to keep, whilst everything else became her husband's. So a chain between her nose and her ear would have been very handy for hanging her diamonds, car keys, and the remote control. A quick mention too for the lip plate, popular in East Africa and parts of the Amazon basin, which normally involves a piercing in the upper lip or lower lip, and then a wooden disc inserted to stretch it out. Actually, I could do with one of those at Christmas. Would make shoveling the food in my face so much easier. And finally, from dolphins on your ankles to This Westerner is an Idiot written in Japanese, it's the wonderful world of tattooing. Various forms of tattooing have existed since Neolithic times, perhaps even further back, but we don't have direct evidence of it. Ötzi the Iceman, who we mentioned before, had tattoo markings to go along with his pierced ears, and his skin is the oldest example of it we have found so far. There are a wide range of reasons and designs for tattoos, from the detailed full-body tribal images to markings on the arms and face to indicate a slave or perhaps a criminal. In Europe, tattooing was less common from the middle of the second millennium, but it was reintroduced by Captain Cook and his crew after a trip to Tahiti. The word tattoo itself comes from the Tahitian tatau, and many of Cook's crew came back with tattoos, which soon started a trend on the high seas and made them associated with sailors and subsequently the criminal classes. They still do have a negative criminal association in places like Japan and are strongly discouraged by many parts of the Islamic world. But around 45 million Americans have one or more tattoos, and a third of all British people. So if you are thinking of getting one to try and rebel, then you would actually be better just getting a side parting, putting on a sensible jumper, and smoking a pipe. The rich history of body modifications has given us some weird and wonderful traditions, and let's hope that some of them keep going, so the entire planet doesn't end up looking exactly the same. If you're thinking about starting your own cultural tradition, go ahead, but please call your mum before you stick that thing through there. I'm not sure it's the best idea you've ever had. Thanks for the view, subscribe for more. 42. Do you worry about a zombie uprising? Well, fear not. The US Department of Defense has you covered. The Pentagon has created a comprehensive plan detailing how to counter a zombie apocalypse. You've heard of snake charming, you may have even hypnotized a chicken, but I bet you've never heard of worm charming.